What if I told you that in the medieval world, marriage was not just the joining of two hearts, but two families, two fates, and sometimes two entire villages? Imagine a wedding where the bride is only 14, where vows are whispered in Latin, where the feast lasts for 3 days, and even the poorest guests drink like kings. Tonight, let go of the noise of today and step into a softer time, where horses were decorated with flower garlands, where minstrels sang under candlelit banners, and where every marriage was a negotiation between duty, love, and legacy. There were dances around bonfires, roasted boars shared with strangers, and quiet glances between the bride and groom that spoke louder than any priest. This is not just history, it is a lullaby from a forgotten world. So close your eyes and let your thoughts drift into the warm flicker of torches, the rustle of linen gowns, and the distant sound of bells that once rang for love and for something far older.
The sun had not yet fully risen, but the village was already awake. In the soft gray light of dawn, the sound of sweeping brooms and crackling fires echoed between the thatched cottages. It was the morning of a wedding, and that meant the whole village had a role to play. Chickens clucked lazily in their coops. The baker's boy hauled heavy baskets of still warm bread across the muddy road. And from within the stone chapel, the old priest carefully lit the candles, one by one, as if each tiny flame carried a blessing. In a small timber-framed house near the edge of the fields, the bride sat still as her mother brushed her long, dark hair. She was only 15, but today she would wear a crown of wildflowers and be called wife. She wore a simple linen dress, dyed with crushed berries and trimmed with lace her grandmother had sewn. No mirrors, no makeup, just the trembling beauty of a girl who had never before worn shoes made for dancing. Outside, boys ran past with bright ribbons in hand, decorating the maypole that would stand at the center of the village square. The smell of herbs and roasting meat floated on the wind. Dogs barked joyfully, sensing the day would be special. But inside the bride's home, all was still. Her father placed a hand gently on her shoulder. No words, just silence. In the medieval world, a marriage was not just a celebration, it was a crossing, a passage from girlhood to womanhood, from the known to the unknown. And as the church bells rang in the distance, deep and solemn, the village knew the day had begun.
The village square was alive, yet still quiet in that respectful, early morning way. A light mist clung to the air, wrapping the trees and rooftops like breath held in silence. Somewhere, a bird called once and then went quiet, as though even nature paused for what was to come. And then, slowly, the procession began. The bride stepped outside, her flower crown slightly trembling with each step. On either side, her cousins walked barefoot, scattering petals torn from last night's harvest flowers. No gold, no silk, just linen and thread, sewn with love and patched with memory. Children laughed and ran ahead, shouting to the smithy to ring his iron bell, a village tradition said to keep away jealous spirits. The groom waited near the chapel, not beside it, but outside the gates, as was custom. He stood straight, his tunic freshly brushed, though his hands betrayed him, fidgeting, unsure. He wasn't much older than her, maybe 17, but his eyes already held the weight of a man who knew that love wasn't always part of marriage, but respect could grow into something deeper. As she approached, he bowed his head, not too low, but just enough. And they didn't speak. Not yet. In front of them lay the chapel's threshold, lined with herbs, rosemary, sage, and lavender, to bring luck and fertility. Behind them, villagers gathered in a soft ring. No invitations, just presents. And that was enough. The priest waited inside, robes brushed, hands folded. And together, hand in hand, with hearts racing beneath simple cloth, the bride and groom stepped over the threshold and into a new life.
Inside the chapel, the air was cooler, stiller. The stone walls held centuries of breath and song, of prayers whispered and promises made. Candles flickered in iron sconces, their flames dancing gently, throwing warm light across weathered tapestries. The priest stepped forward, not as a man of grandeur, but as a quiet keeper of old customs. His voice was steady, low, almost like a lullaby. No elaborate sermons, just words passed down through generations. He asked them their names, not just for the record, but to ground their souls to the moment. She said hers first, voice soft but clear. He followed, his voice trembling only slightly. There were no rings, not in this village. Instead, the priest tied a length of woven wool around their joined hands, a hand-fasting cord, dyed with local herbs, its fibers coarse but strong. As these threads are bound, so too are your paths. A hush fell over the small crowd. No one shifted, no one whispered. Even the children held their breath. The couple stood in silence, gazing not into each other's eyes, but just ahead, shoulder to shoulder, already learning the weight of togetherness. Then came the final blessing, not of riches, not of beauty, but of peace. May your roof keep you warm, may your meals be shared, and may your names be spoken with kindness. With that, the priest stepped back. The ceremony was done. No grand applause, just a moment of stillness, like the earth itself had paused, nodded, and moved on. Outside, a breeze stirred the grass, and the newlyweds stepped into it, changed, not by magic, but by the quiet power of tradition.
The vows had been said, the hands untied, the air now easier to breathe. But outside the chapel, something else stirred, something hungrier, more human. The feast. Not a royal banquet, no golden goblets or silver platters. This was a village feast. Wooden cables carried by calloused hands, blankets laid across grass, bread still warm from the morning fire, cheese wrapped in leaves, stew bubbling in iron pots over open flames. The bride and groom sat together at the head, not on thrones, but on carved stools draped with wool. Around them, friends and family gathered. Children chased chickens between the benches. Laughter echoed in the wide air. And slowly, bowls were passed, first to the couple, then to the elders, then to everyone else. No one rushed, no one grabbed. This was not only food, it was ritual. The meal was meant to fill not only bellies, but hearts. Every bite a blessing, every sip a wish for long life, strong sons, and peaceful nights. Wine came next, homemade, a little sour, but rich with stories. Mugs clinked, toasts were made, not in long speeches, but in simple words. To warmth, to laughter, to love that outlasts the seasons. The groom reached for her hand, not shyly, not boldly, just naturally. She didn't pull away. And in that gesture, there was more than affection. There was promise, not of wealth or ease, but of effort, of choosing one another again and again. As the sun moved west and the stew grew thick and low in the pot, a hush fell once more, not of tiredness, but of peace. The day was far from over, but for now, they sat. They ate. They were together. And that was enough. The plates were cleared.
The sun had bowed out quietly, slipping behind the hills. And now the real celebration began. A lone flute began to play, soft, breathy notes like wind through wheat. Then came the rhythm, a drum no larger than a dinner plate, tapped with calloused fingers. And finally, a lute, its strings slightly out of tune, but full of heart. The villagers tapped their toes, then clapped, then rose. The bride's veil was removed, replaced by a crown of woven herbs. Not gold, not silver, just rosemary, lavender, and ivy. Someone began to sing. Not a trained voice, not perfect, but warm, like an old friend humming you to sleep. The first dance was for the couple. He bowed low, as was custom. She nodded modestly before taking his hand. Their movements were slow, not elegant, not practiced, but deeply sincere. Around them, the village joined in, a slow circle growing wider with each pass. Children leapt between feet. Old women clapped from benches. Dogs barked happily, weaving through the crowd. Torches were lit. Shadows flickered across faces, and the stars began to appear as if called by the music itself. The bride smiled, tired perhaps, but glowing. The groom laughed, a real laugh, not forced. And for one long, gentle hour, time seemed to stop. There was only music and light, and the scent of smoke and flowers in the dark. They did not dance like nobles. They danced like people who had worked hard and loved harder. And that was its own kind of beauty.
The dancing faded, little by little. One musician yawned and lowered his lute. A child, curled up beneath a bench, was already dreaming. The air had grown colder, but not unpleasantly so. It wrapped around the villagers like a woolen shawl. Leftovers still lined the wooden tables. Cold meat pies, half-eaten loaves of bread, scraps of soft cheese. The scent of spilled cider clung to the wood. A few hens pecked at crumbs beneath the benches, uncaring of the festivities above. Inside the cottage, the bride sat by the hearth. She had removed her shoes, and her feet were muddy from dancing. Her gown was wrinkled. Her cheeks still carried the faint flush of happiness. But her eyes were distant. Not sad, just full. As if too many emotions had knocked at the same door all at once. The older women gathered around her, bringing broth and clay cups. They did not offer advice, just presence. Their silence was a comfort more ancient than words. Outside, the groom was speaking with the elder. There were traditions still to be followed, of course. Gifts exchanged, blessings whispered, a ritual involving smoke, and small branches laid in a circle. It wasn't grand, it wasn't rich, but it meant something. And that's what this night was made of. Moments that meant something. One villager played a slow rhythm on the edge of a pot, tapping it like a drum. Someone hummed in harmony, and in the distance, the moon hung low, fat and round like bread still warm from the oven. The feast was over, the dancing done, but the story was just beginning.
The cottage was small. Just one room with thick walls of wattle and daub. A single wooden bed stood in the corner, layered with straw and soft wool blankets. The fire had died to glowing embers. Outside, the night whispered. Crickets, wind, the fading steps of villagers heading home. The young bride stepped inside first. Her hands trembled only slightly. She wasn't afraid, not really. But everything felt new, like waking up in someone else's dream. The groom followed. He closed the door behind him, gently. There was no rush, no grand performance. Only stillness, only breath. He removed his cloak and placed it on a peg, then his boots dusted from the dancing. He looked around the small room, the herbs hanging from the ceiling,
the cup of water by the bedside, the piece of lace someone had tucked under the pillow for luck. They didn't speak for a while. They just stood there, watching the fire fade. In the medieval world, the wedding night wasn't always private. Sometimes elders waited nearby. Sometimes proof was required. But not here. Not this night. This was a village that believed in silence, in patience, in time. The bride sat down on the edge of the bed. She took a deep breath. The groom joined her, his hand brushing hers. There was no ceremony now, no audience, no expectations, just two people, learning the shape of comfort. He touched her face like one might touch a story, gently, reverently, without needing to understand every word. Outside, the moon moved higher. Inside, two souls leaned quietly toward a beginning, not of passion, but of peace. And peace, in a world full of storms, was the rarest kind of love.
The sun rose gently, casting golden light across the thatched rooftops. Smoke curled from chimneys. A rooster crowed once, then again, as if announcing not just the morning, but something new. Inside the cottage, the couple stirred slowly. There was no rush to rise. The world outside could wait. The bride sat up first, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. She looked toward the window, where light danced through dust motes, turning them into drifting stars. Her fingers found the edge of the blanket, tracing its worn fibers like a map of every hand that had woven it. The groom moved next. He didn't speak, only watched her in the quiet. In the silence, everything felt sacred. Every glance, every breath, every gentle stretch of limbs waking to a new life. Breakfast waited on the hearth. Leftover bread, a bit of soft cheese, and a bowl of warm barley porridge. Simple, but today, it tasted different. Marriage in the medieval world wasn't about fairy tales. There were no white dresses, no orchestras, no diamond rings. But there was warmth. There was continuity. There was the knowledge that two people had chosen to face the seasons together. Outside, footsteps approached. A neighbor bringing a jug of fresh milk. Another with a small bouquet of herbs tied in twine. Tokens, blessings, quiet acknowledgments that the world had shifted just slightly. The couple stepped outside together. She held his arm, not tightly, but with ease, the way trees lean toward the light. In the fields beyond, the earth was waking too, and somewhere in that golden hush, two hearts beat, not in excitement, but in calm.
The morning air carried more than the scent of fresh bread or blooming herbs. It carried whispers. Old beliefs passed from mouth to ear, generation to generation. A marriage was never just a union of two hearts. It was a knot tied between families, futures, and sometimes fates. And to protect that knot, the village had its ways. First came the gifts, not wrapped in silk, but tucked in cloth or straw. A wooden spoon carved by an elder, a patch of wool spun by a grandmother's fingers. Simple, yes, but filled with care, each item chosen not for luxury, but for meaning. Then came the blessings, spoken quietly by those who had seen many winters. A mother would murmur, "May your roof never leak." A father might whisper, May your quarrels be brief and your love long. But behind those words lingered superstitions. The couple would not sweep their home for 3 days, to avoid sweeping away their good luck. A sprig of rosemary was hung above the doorway for remembrance, loyalty, and protection. No one wore red on the wedding night, for red was a color too bold, too tied to conflict. And if a cat crossed the threshold before the sun had fully risen, they'd wait to leave the house until it had stepped out again, not in fear, but in quiet respect for the old ways. Some would laugh at these beliefs, others would follow them without question. But in a world where the weather could change fates, and a bad harvest could change lives, people clung to the small things, to the rituals, the herbs, the whispered words. The newlyweds listened, not because they believed in every charm or warning, but because listening itself was a form of love. And so the day moved on, slow, warm, and wrapped in the soft hush of tradition, as though even the wind had paused to let this union settle into the earth like roots after rain.
The sun had begun its descent. Shadows stretched longer across the fields. The laughter from earlier still lingered in the air, but softer now, like a song remembered. The feast was over. Empty trenchers rested beside half-filled mugs. A roasted leg of lamb, now just bones. Cheese rinds, apple cores, crumbs on linen. But no one rushed to clean. The world had slowed. Children slept on benches, their faces sticky with honey. Old men leaned back, letting the warmth of wine settle in their bones. Women hummed as they gathered leftover herbs into bundles. Thyme, sage, lavender. The bride and groom sat quietly beneath an old oak, not speaking much, just watching the way the smoke curled up into the dimming sky, watching the way the lanterns were lit one by one, watching the way the stars began to arrive without sound or ceremony. They were no longer the center of attention, and they didn't need to be, because now the marriage had settled into its place, no longer a celebration, but a gentle beginning. Behind them, someone strummed a lute, a slow melody with no words, only feeling. The kind of song that asked nothing from you, that let you simply sit and breathe. And so the night came, not with fanfare, but with stillness. One by one, the villagers wandered home. The bride rested her head on the groom's shoulder, and together, without saying a word, they listened to the world fall asleep, just like your viewers might do now.
The cottage was small, with low wooden beams and a straw-stuffed mattress. A single candle flickered near the window, casting long shadows on the wall. The scent of rosewater lingered, gifted by a village elder for good luck. Inside, the bride sat quietly, her hair unbraided now, her dress laid carefully across a wooden chest. She wasn't nervous, not exactly. But the world had changed in one day, from daughter to wife. The door creaked softly. He stepped in, her husband. His boots were dusty from dancing. He looked tired, but kind. They didn't speak at first. Words felt too sharp for the softness of this moment. He knelt to remove his boots. She offered a smile, small, shy, and then silence. Not awkward silence, but the deep, golden kind, like the hush between notes of a lullaby. Outside, the village had gone still. No more music, no more firelight, just the whisper of wind through the thatch. She reached for his hand, not as a ritual, not as a duty, but because it felt natural.
2 lives, now braided like thread. Not yet love, but something gentler, like warmth under a blanket, like breath shared in the dark. The candle guttered low, and without fanfare or flourish, they lay down together, not to rush, not to claim, but to rest. Because even in medieval times, the first night of marriage didn't have to be about passion or fear. Sometimes it was simply about not being alone anymore. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of everything.
Dawn crept gently over the fields. A pale mist clung to the grass, and birds sang as if they too had attended the wedding. Inside the cottage, the fire had gone cold. The bride stirred first, her eyes adjusting to the soft gray light. She did not rush to rise. There was no need. The world outside still moved at a medieval pace. There were no clocks to chase, no urgent messages, only the rhythm of roosters and bread rising in ovens. Her husband still slept, one arm draped across the furs. For a moment she simply watched him, not with awe, not with worry, just quiet curiosity. Marriage had changed her name, her role, her future, but it hadn't changed the soft morning sun on her skin or the peace in her chest. She rose and wrapped herself in a woolen shawl. The floor was cold. The air smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. At the door, she paused. The village was waking. A cart creaked by. Chickens clucked from a pen. Life was already returning to its usual hum. She stepped outside and drew in a breath. Not as a bride, not as a symbol, but as a woman. Behind her, he stirred, noticing the emptiness beside him. Their eyes met through the open door. He smiled, sleepy, warm. She smiled back. No grand declarations, no fairy tale words. Just 2 people who had crossed a threshold together. In time, there would be chores, expectations, maybe children. But for now, just morning light and the first quiet steps into their new, shared world.
The sun rose higher, golden over the rooftops. Today was the day the couple would visit her husband's family, a custom in many villages, a quiet ceremony after the louder one. They walked the winding dirt path side by side, not hand in hand, such things were rare in public, but their steps were in rhythm. His family lived in a cottage further out, near the orchards. The trees swayed gently as they approached, their branches like arms whispering, "Welcome or beware." His mother waited at the door, a sturdy woman with flour on her apron and wisdom in her eyes. She studied the bride, not with coldness, but with deep, weighing care. This was not judgment, it was legacy. Inside, the air was warm with baking bread and dried herbs. The bride offered a humble gift, a cloth she'd stitched herself, edges carefully hemmed. The mother accepted it with a nod. They sat at the small table. Wood creaked, cups clinked. Words were few, but every glance spoke volumes. The father, quieter still, nodded now and then. He asked simple questions. Could she cook? Could she sew? Did she know when to plant onions? The bride answered gently, not with pride, but with calm assurance. She did not try to impress, only to belong. The meal was served. Root vegetables, crusty bread, goat cheese. Not rich food, but honest. She ate slowly, mindfully, grateful. As they rose to leave, the mother handed her a pouch of dried lavender. For the home, for dreams, for peace. No one said welcome to the family, but as they walked away, the bride felt something settle inside her. Not acceptance just yet, but possibility. That evening, the couple returned home in silence. Not
tense, not tired, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long day of being watched, measured, and remembered. Their small cottage now truly felt like theirs. The fire crackled gently. The scent of lavender from his mother's gift filled the room. Outside, the village had gone to sleep, but inside, a new chapter waited. In medieval custom, the bridal bed was more than just a place to rest. It was a symbol. Sometimes the whole village would gather to escort the couple to their room, a public display of a private beginning. In other places, it was more discreet, with only a midwife or an elder blessing the door with salt and herbs. Tonight, it was only them. No music, no laughter, only the sound of straw shifting in the mattress. She touched the linen sheets, folded and smooth. He lit a single candle, its flame dancing like a nervous thought. Then came the blessing. He took a pinch of dried rosemary, protection and fidelity. She placed it near the window where spirits might enter. Together they whispered a few simple words. Not magic, not prayer, but a hope for peace, for patience, for understanding. They sat on the edge of the bed. No rush, no expectation, only the gentle weight of the moment. Like two travelers at the edge of a forest, not knowing what comes next, but ready to walk it together. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Inside, the candle flickered low. And for the first time, they rested not as two strangers, but as one. Morning crept in quietly. Not with fanfare, not with drums, but with soft golden light sneaking through the cracks in the wooden shutters. Birdsong floated gently in the air, low, slow, and rhythmic, as if the world itself was still half asleep. They woke without words, no need to rush, no voices calling from the fields, no guests waiting at the door, just the two of them and the faint warmth of a new day. She watched the dust floating in the air, tiny specks of gold. He listened to the wind outside. As it moved through the trees, then the cottage beams, like an old lullaby played backwards. This was not a fairy tale ending, it was a beginning. And beginnings in this world were quiet things. There were no grand declarations, only small gestures. He poured her a cup of honeyed water. She folded the wool blanket at the foot of the bed. They shared bread from last night's feast, now cool and a bit stale, but somehow still perfect. Later, they would greet the village, thank the guests, begin the slow dance of life. Markets, seasons, illnesses, harvests. But for now, for this soft, stolen morning, they belonged only to the silence, only to the calm. And in that moment, medieval marriage was not about duty, nor land, nor names. It was simply two souls, learning how to be near one another.
The village quiets under the soft weight of twilight. Inside the bride's cottage, a gentle hum floats in the air, not of voices, but of preparations. Candlelight flickers against the wooden beams, casting long shadows across the walls as women move gently about the room, their hands busy with care. Hair is braided, not in haste, but in reverence. Ribbons are tied with fingers that have done this many times before, and yet tonight each knot feels sacred. Outside, the stars slowly bloom in the sky like wildflowers opening in darkness. The bride sits in silence, wrapped in layers of linen, wool, and dreams. Her friends surround her not with noise, but with presence, brushing strands of her hair, oiling her hands, whispering small blessings that only the candles hear. Someone hums a lullaby, one the bride's mother once sang to her, now reborn through the lips of a younger girl. It speaks of patience and of love not as fire, but as warmth in winter. In another home across the village, the groom sits on a wooden bench, surrounded by older men. His eyes flicker with a quiet excitement, though his hands remain still.
A horn of ale passes between them, yet tonight the drink is not for celebration, but for grounding. They speak of marriage not as joy alone, but as duty, as soil that must be tilled each day, as wood that must be carved carefully. The night deepens. Somewhere in the forest beyond, an owl calls once, then again. In the bride's room, a dried bundle of herbs is hung above the door. Rosemary for memory, lavender for peace, sage for strength. A small loaf of bread is wrapped in linen, tucked into the bridal chest, not to eat, but to carry, a symbol that no matter what life brings, the home must never go hungry. And as the final candles burn low, the village sleeps, and beneath the blanket of night, two lives, once separate, prepare to intertwine. In this medieval world, weddings are not only beginnings, they are rituals of belonging, of stepping from one path into another, of whispering to the stars, "I am ready." And in the silence before dawn, the world seems to hold its breath.
The first light of dawn filters gently through the morning mist, bathing the village in a pale golden hue. Smoke rises lazily from thatched rooftops. Birds stir in hedges. Somewhere far off, a church bell tolls, slow and steady, as if marking not just time, but tradition. Today is the wedding day. The village awakens with a quiet purpose, not hurried, not loud, just present. In the bride's home, hands lift the veil, hand sewn with threads of silver and tiny beads passed down from a grandmother's gown. Her dress, simple yet radiant, flows like linen clouds. Flowers are woven into her braids, white and wild, fresh from the field. She does not speak, nor do those around her. But there is something holy in the silence, like the hush before a prayer. Then comes the soft beat of drums, at first far away, like thunder rolling over hills, then closer, heartbeats echoing in rhythm. It is the groom's party, arriving at last. The villagers step out to watch. Mothers hold children close. Old men lean on walking sticks. Chickens scatter. A pig trots unconcerned across the road. And then they see him. The groom walks with a slow, respectful pace, not proud, but grounded. He wears a long tunic of deep blue, dyed with rare woad, his belt lined with symbols of his family's trade. A small pouch swings from it, heavy with silver coins for the dowry gift, not for show, but for honor. Musicians follow behind, two with hand drums, one with a wooden flute, and another strumming a stringed lyre. Their melody is not cheerful, but solemn, a sound that honors love's weight, not just its sweetness. The bride steps out flanked by her sisters. A hush falls. Children scatter kettles in her path, bright against the dusty ground. A young boy carries a sprig of hawthorn, believed to protect against envy. Behind them, women hum a slow harmonia tune that speaks of hope, of patience, of planting something new. As bride and groom meet in the village square, they do not touch hands, not yet. First, there are blessings. The priest, robes faded, eyes kind, stands between them, reading not from a grand book, but from memory. His voice rises and falls like wind in trees. He speaks of union not as perfection, but as promise, not as fantasy, but as faith. They exchange rings, not golden, but braided twine dipped in holy water. Finally, the families approach. Each elder offers a gift, a bowl of salt to preserve the marriage, a loaf of black bread to remind them of life's harsh seasons, a strip of cloth to bind their wrists in the handfasting ritual that will come later.
The music swells again, soft and steady, as the couple begins the walk toward the chapel on the hill. Behind them, the entire village follows. No one is left behind. In this world, a wedding is not a private affair. It is a promise made in full view, with every footstep marking the road ahead, a road they do not walk alone. And as they climb that hill, two figures wrapped in silence and ceremony, the morning sun warms the earth below.
The chapel is old. Not crumbling, not forgotten, but aged in a way that feels sacred. Stone walls worn smooth by centuries of fingers brushing past. Wooden beams darkened by candle soot and time. Ivy creeps along the outer stones as if the earth itself holds the building in a soft embrace. Inside, it is cool and quiet. The bride and groom step slowly across the threshold, their steps echoing faintly beneath the arched ceiling. The heavy wooden door creaks closed behind them. Sunlight filters through stained glass windows, casting colors onto the worn floor. Reds, greens, blues, like spilled paint on ancient stone. Villagers file in behind, but they do not crowd. They leave space, standing in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Some hold hands, some whisper quiet prayers. Others simply close their eyes and breathe. There is no orchestra, no grand organ, only the soft hum of the wind outside and the occasional rustle of robes. The priest stands before the altar, a simple table draped in linen, topped with a single wooden cross, a bowl of holy water, and a loaf of bread. Today's sacred offering. He speaks again, not loudly, but clearly. His voice doesn't need volume, it has weight. He speaks of partnership, of sacrifice, of the seasons that await them, times of plenty, times of hunger, days when laughter will be easy, and nights when it won't. The bride and groom are asked to look into each other's eyes. They do. No words pass between them, but something stronger than language lives in that gaze. Understanding, respect, hope. The priest places their hands together, palm to palm, and ties them with the cloth, red and gold, dyed by hand, embroidered with simple patterns passed down from grandmother to granddaughter. This is handfasting, the ancient rite. Not just a joining of two people, but of two families, two lineages, two threads in the long tapestry of life. He blesses the cloth, then unties it gently. It is now a symbol, not a binding. Then come the vows. Simple, unwritten, spoken from the heart. I will not walk ahead of you, nor behind. I will walk beside you until the sun no longer rises. The bride answers, her voice steady as still water. And I will carry your burdens as if they were my own, and share my joys as if they were yours. The chapel holds its breath. The priest nods once, slowly. They are married. No applause, no cheering, just a silence filled with something deeper than noise, a reverent stillness, where the only sound is the flutter of a bird's wings outside and the soft sniffle of an old woman wiping her eyes. They turn, hand in hand, and walk back down the aisle. And as they pass, each villager bows their head, not out of duty, but out of love. The door opens again, spilling sunlight across their path. Outside, the world awaits. But inside this small chapel, something eternal has been spoken.
The village square, once quiet, now glows with warmth. Torches are lit along every path, their flames flickering like whispers against the evening sky. Tables, long, wooden, and lovingly worn by time, are set beneath the open air. Wooden cups, clay bowls, and tin plates await what's to come. Blankets are draped over benches, and fresh hay softens the ground beneath. The newlyweds enter first. No trumpets, no fanfare, just the steady rhythm of footsteps and the low murmur of the people rising to greet them. As they take their seats at the head of the feast, the village elder steps forward, a woman with silver hair braided tightly down her back. She raises a cup, made not of gold, but of polished horn, and speaks words in the old tongue. A blessing, not only for love, but for long harvests, for many children, for days without war, for bread always in the oven, and laughter always in the home. Then it begins. From the side alleys and tucked corners of the village, women appear carrying trays, baskets of warm bread, round and golden, stews simmering in heavy iron pots, filled with root vegetables, bits of venison, and herbs from the garden. Wheels of cheese, soft and fragrant. Bowls of wild berries, blue, red, purple, picked that very morning. Everyone eats. Not just the bride and groom, not just the elders, but every child, every laborer, every passerby who had the luck of walking through the village on this very night. There are no menus, only what the earth gave them and what the hands of the people could make from it. A boy runs past, laughing, his cheeks stuffed with bread. A dog follows, tail wagging, hoping for crumbs. An old man tells a tale to a group of children sitting cross-legged in the dirt, their eyes wide with wonder as he describes a wedding he once attended during the time of the last king. The firelight dances across faces, some joyful, some tired, all at peace. A young girl sings softly under her breath as she braids flower stems into a crown. She doesn't notice the way her grandmother watches her, quietly, lovingly, remembering the time when she was young and wore flowers in her hair too. And beneath it all, there is a rhythm. The gentle clink of spoons, the crackle of fire, the hum of conversations. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's the sound of life. Real, unpolished, and full. The bride laughs truly, freely for the first time all day. The groom leans in close, whispering something only she will hear. She nods, cheeks flushed, eyes glowing in the candlelight. The feast carries on, slowly. No rush, no speeches, just moments, shared glances, passed plates, stories traded like gold. And as the moon rises high above the square, casting silver light over the celebration, you can't help but feel it too. That this is more than a meal. It is a memory being written, not in ink, not in stone, but in smiles, warmth, and the gentle fullness of the heart.
The feast may have filled every belly, but now it is the heart that must be fed. As bowls are cleared and lanterns trimmed, a new rhythm enters the square. Not from drums or flutes at first, but from footsteps. A soft shuffle on the earth. A tap of heel against wood. Then another. A group of musicians gathers near the central fire. They do not wear bright colors or carry grand instruments. Their lutes are worn smooth by years of songs. Their fiddles patched and mended with care. One man carries a flute carved from bone, its sound as old as the hills. They do not speak. They simply begin. A low, winding tune curls through the square like mist. It starts in the shadows between torchlight and silence, then grows, gently, surely, into something warmer. The first to move are the children. Not with practiced steps, but with joy. They spin in circles, arms outstretched, cheeks pink from stew and cider. Their laughter becomes part of the melody. Then the older folk rise, slowly, stiffly, but with smiles. A woman claps in rhythm as she sways beside her husband.
Two boys leap in time, daring each other to match the fiddler's pace. And then the bride. She stands quietly at first, her hands brushing the folds of her dress. The groom offers a hand, and she takes it. Together, they step into the circle. The villagers part like water, giving them space, not to perform, but to be. They do not glide like nobles. They do not twirl like dancers in courts. They move like two people who know the feel of each other's hands, who've walked muddy roads and lifted heavy buckets and laughed on long evenings. Their dance is a conversation, one without words. And the village watches, not with applause, but with something softer, like reverence, like blessing. More couples join in, and then more. The square becomes a sea of movement. Slow, easy, glowing in the firelight. The musicians never quicken the pace. They keep it steady, like the heartbeat of the night. The flute weaves high above, like a memory. The lute carries the weight of the present. And somewhere between them, the fiddle sings of the future. Off to the side, a young boy tries to mimic the dance. His feet tangle and he falls laughing. His sister helps him up. She teaches him the steps, not with scolding, but with a smile. And though he stumbles again, this time he does not fall. An old woman clutches a shawl to her shoulders. She watches the flames flicker across the dancers. Perhaps she sees herself there many years ago. Or perhaps she simply listens to the music, letting it carry her somewhere deep inside. Above them all, the stars come out. Dozens at first, then hundreds. And the moon, full and kind, shines over the celebration like a guardian. Its light touches the rooftops, the trees, the faces turned upward in joy. The dance will not last forever. Eventually, the music will fade. The torches will burn low. Children will fall asleep in their parents' arms. The square will empty, leaving only footprints in the dust. But for now, for this one slow, golden moment, there is only music and moonlight and the quiet truth that happiness needs no riches, only warmth, rhythm, and someone to share it with.
As the last notes of music fade into the starlit air and laughter softens into murmurs, the village slowly returns to stillness. Lanterns flicker low, dancers retreat to chairs or shoulders. Even the fires seem to sigh, content. But not all have gone home, for in one corner of the square, a gentle procession begins. It is not loud or grand, no trumpets, no fanfare. Just close friends and family, moving slowly, holding candles in both hands, lighting the path from the square to the newlyweds' chamber. The couple follows in silence. The bride, her face warm from dancing, her flowers now loosened in her hair. The groom, a step behind, not leading, but walking beside the life he has chosen. This is a ritual as old as the village. Not sacred, but meaningful. At the door of their small home, or perhaps a borrowed room in a noble's hall, they pause. One of the older women steps forward. She whispers blessings in a language that only the wind remembers. A prayer for peace, for patience, for kindness above all. Then she places her hand on the bride's shoulder and steps away. No one enters with them. The door is shut, and quietness follows. Inside, the world is soft. A single candle burns beside the bed. The sheets are clean, the mattress stuffed with straw and herbs. Lavender and mint scent the air, not to impress, but to soothe. There are no expectations in this room, no commands or customs forced upon them, only the slow unwinding of a day long and full. They sit,
not as strangers, not yet as lovers, as two people who have danced, eaten, laughed, and now share the hush between midnight and morning. Perhaps he pours her a cup of warm cider. Perhaps she loosens the ties at her sleeves, sighing into comfort. There is no rush in this room. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere, an owl calls. Far off, the last torch is snuffed. And in this small room, under a thatched roof and wooden beams, they speak in whispers. Not of passion, but of simple things. Where he grew up, what her mother once said, the silly thing the goat did last spring. Laughter comes gently like a ripple, then stillness. Maybe they lie together, hand in hand, not out of duty, but choice. Maybe sleep finds them before anything else. Or maybe they just listen to the fire crackling, to the distant wind, to the newness of being we instead of me. There is no curtain to draw, no photographer, no audience, just them. And in the quiet cradle of that room, two souls begin the smallest kind of forever, not with fire, but with warmth.
The sky is still pale, not quite blue, not quite gold, just a soft mist of color, like the first breath after a dream. Bird song stirs the branches. The village, once noisy with feasts and dancing, is now hushed, but not asleep. Roosters call, boots scuff against dew-soaked paths, and chimney smoke curls into the crisp morning air. Inside the newlyweds' home, there is no urgency. The candle that once burned has melted to a stump. The sheets are wrinkled with sleep. One of them stirs, shifts slightly, the other follows. It is not the beginning of a fairy tale, but of something simpler and perhaps more beautiful. They do not speak right away. Instead, there is that strange, silent comfort between two people who have stepped across a threshold together. Perhaps they smile. Perhaps they stretch and sigh. Maybe one of them gets up and pulls a wool shawl over their shoulders. Outside, the villagers begin to move again. Old women sweep porches. Young boys chase a dog past the bakery. Smoke from the blacksmith's forge signals the return to daily life. But for the couple, this morning is not quite like the others. They are no longer guests to the celebration, no longer performers in a ritual. They are simply married. And the world feels different. Not louder, not heavier, just changed. In the kitchen, perhaps a small breakfast waits, set there by a kind hand the night before. A loaf of bread, a wedge of cheese, a jar of honey that catches the morning light. They eat in silence, or in soft words. No pressure to fill the air. Maybe she laughs at the way he tears the bread unevenly. Maybe he gently brushes crumbs from her chin. Everything feels slower. And in that slowness, something grows. Not passion, not excitement, but peace. It is a feeling that life will be ordinary, but not empty, that they will plant seeds together, hang clothes on the line, take turns boiling the wash water, and yes, argue, apologize, and try again. Outside, a neighbor waves. Children shout their names playfully. A rooster struts past the window, and they are still sitting there. The fire crackles softly in the hearth. Their hands are near, but not always touching. Their eyes meet, and it's not a question anymore. It's an answer. Today is not a beginning or an ending. It is just the next breath in a life they now share.
The sun is higher now, brushing the rooftops with pale warmth. The newlyweds step outside together for the first time since the vows. No procession, no music, just the sound of earth beneath their feet. The village is already alive. Children chase a wooden hoop down the path. A baker waves flour-dusted hands from the window. The blacksmith, sleeves rolled, pauses mid-swing to nod in their direction.
There are no grand announcements, no bells, only quiet acknowledgments, a shared glance here, a murmured blessing there. As they pass, some villagers speak softly. "May your roof never leak," says the old woman with the willow basket, eyes kind behind her wrinkles. "May your bread always rise," adds the baker, offering a warm roll from his morning batch. And someone, they never quite see who, leaves a bundle of herbs at their doorstep. Lavender and rosemary, wrapped in twine. A sign of protection, a wish for peace. They don't talk much as they walk. There's no need. Their presence together already says everything. The cobbled paths are familiar to each of them, yet suddenly new. Now the blacksmith's forge smells sharper. The chatter of the market feels closer. Even the church bell, distant and slow, seems to ring just for them. As they pass the well, an old man dips his bucket and glances up. "Marriage is like drawing water," he says, voice low and cracked. "Some days it's cool and clean. Other days the rope slips. But either way, you drink it together." They smile, unsure whether to laugh or bow, but the moment passes gently. Later, she lingers at the apothecary, picking herbs for the cupboard. He stops to help a boy untangle a sheep from a fence. No one rushes them. No one expects too much. It is enough that they are here, together. Evening draws nearer. Shadows stretch long across the earth. Back at their small home, the hearth is lit again. A stew bubbles. Somewhere outside, a flute plays, off-key, but heartfelt. And in the fading light, they sit once more, side by side. No masks, no crowds, just the quiet presence of two lives beginning to braid themselves into one. Outside, the world continues, unchanged. But inside, they are different now. Not because of vows spoken or feasts held, but because the village has seen them, not as strangers, not as children, but as a pair. And in that quiet, collective gaze, something ancient is passed down. A blessing, a welcome, a beginning.
Thank you for walking this quiet path with Dreamwoven History. Tonight, you wandered through garlands of ivy and halls of stone, where love was not found in diamonds or promises, but in shared bread, slow dances, and the hush of a village beneath the stars. You stood by the flickering torches of a medieval wedding. You heard the music, soft and ancient, and watched as two people promised not just their hearts, but their labor, their warmth, their every tomorrow. In this world, beauty was simple. A hand held through hardship, a shared laugh after toil, a glance across a crowded feast hall that said, "I see you, I choose you." There were no fairy tales here, only truth woven into songs, footsteps in the dust, and vows whispered in candlelight. And maybe, just maybe, something in that simplicity still calls to us today. So as you drift now into sleep, let your breath slow. Let the echoes of lutes and laughter fade. Let yourself rest in a time where love was not perfect, but it was real. Until our next journey through time, sleep well, dreamer, and good night.